Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock and I shall commence this meeting of the Development Control Committee of Basingstoke Borough Council in virtual session. For the benefit of the members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I'd like to explain who everybody is. My name is Councillor Paul Miller and I'm the chairman of the committee. This committee meeting is being held virtually in accordance with the Council's rules for virtual meetings, which reflect the recently published government regulations implementing the Coronavirus Act. This meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will be also be available to view after the meeting is finished. Councillors who sit on this committee and who will be making the decisions of the applications before us are identified by name on the screen. Councillors addressing the committee as ward members will be introduced by name. Can I ask the officers who will be advising the committee to introduce themselves and their role?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Townsend. I'm the Planning and Development Manager.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Sowden and I'm an Assistant Planning Manager.
Good afternoon. My name is Philip Richards and I'm a Senior Planning Officer.
Good afternoon. I'm Bernadette Rennick, Democratic Services Officer.
Good afternoon. I'm Anne Greaves, the Legal Services Manager.
The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be assessing the material brought before us and listening to the representations made and will make decisions based on planning reasons. In reaching these decisions, we are guided by national planning and local planning policy and guidance. I understand that planning decisions can be emotive and ask that everybody remains polite and professional and patient throughout the meeting in case of any slight delay in presentations. Unless speaking, officers will have their videos switched off to provide clarity as to who the committee members are for those watching and participating. At this point, can I ask all officers present to switch off their video? The officers present will only switch their video links on during the item that they are presenting or where they wish to be invited to speak by me as chair. For this virtual meeting, councillors should observe the normal rules of behaviour under the Member Code of Conduct and ensure that they are not disturbed during the meeting. Can members ensure that their mobile phones are now switched off or on silent? Members of the committee will turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they've been invited to speak by myself as chair. Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote on the item under discussion. Members can indicate that they wish to speak by raising their hand and should only speak when I as chair invite them to do so. When we move into debate of the application, may I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and to keep any comments on each agenda item to a maximum of 4 minutes. As chair, I will confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda before they address the committee by audio link. Councillors should declare that they are leaving the meeting and switch off the video link if they have an interest that they need to declare or if they have predetermined an item on the agenda. They can then switch on their video link on again when I call them to the next agenda item. Where the member of the committee that has had a predetermination position on an application and is registered to speak under the public speaking system scheme, they will stand down from the meeting and will only be able to participate as a visiting councillor by audio link. They will then rejoin the meeting as a member of the committee once the application has been determined. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting by audio link in the order set out in the update paper, but I reserve the right to reorder the speaking in the event that technical difficulties occur. I will ask each speaker to confirm their name and interest in the item before commencing their contribution. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and keep their points on the application to material reasons only No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning is finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. Voting will be taken by a roll call, and I will confirm the recommendation or motion that is to be voted upon before the voting begins. When each member unmutes their microphone to vote, they can leave a small pause before speaking to allow their vote to be heard. Can each member then indicate whether they are for or against the recommendation or motion, and whether they wish to abstain? Hopefully we will not have any IT problems, but can I remind councillors that if their connection is lost, then they should immediately advise the Democratic Support Officer and use their meeting link to access the meeting again. Right, I will now commence the agenda for the virtual DC today. And first of all, we have to cover apologies for absence and substitutions. And I understand that Councillor Cooper will not be attending today with no substitution.
That's right, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andy. Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations. Item number 3 on the agenda, there are no urgent matters that have been brought before me. And we will move on to minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of May, 2020. The minutes of the meeting held on May 2020 will be approved at the next Development Control Committee meeting to be held on the 10th of June, 2020. They have now been placed on the website, and all members of the committee may peruse it, and we'll check with you in again on the 10th of June. I move on to applications on the agenda for determination today, and it'll be item number 1. And I have no speakers apart from the officer presenting. Lisa, if you would introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of a summer house at 16 Elm Road, Sherborne, St John. The site lies within the settlement policy boundary. The proposed summer house is to be located in the front garden of the property, and you will see on page 9 of the photo pack that you've already had before you the exact location of the summer house itself. The reason this application is before members is because the applicant was previously, at the time of submission, a member of the council's employment. The application is before you since the summer house is to be sited forward of the principal elevation of the main dwelling. It does not benefit from permitted development rights. The proposal is recommended for approval with conditions as set out in the main papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. As there are no speakers, members, any questions to officers? No questions. Is there a debate? Councillor Nick Robinson.
I move the recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Andrew McCormick. It's been duly moved and seconded for approval. I will commence a poll. Councillor George.
Approve with recommendation.
You're for the recommendation.
Correct.
For, against, or abstain?
For the recommendation.
For the recommendation. Thank you. Councillor David Leakes.
For.
Councillor Nick Robinson. Proposed.
For.
Councillor Goodison. Councillor Goodison.
Everything.
I'm sorry?
I've lost every connection.
We can
Well,
hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, well, the answer, I heard all the evidence, etc., but the screen's gone, so I vote for.
For, thank you. Councillor Court.
For.
Councillor Grant,
4,
Councillor McCormack,
4,
Councillor Mike Bound,
4,
Councillor Potter,
4,
and Councillor Tomlin.
4,
Thank you. Bernie,
that was 10 for the recommendation.
thank you. That is approved. Officers,
Just to confirm, the application has been approved, subject to conditions set out in the main paper.
thank you very much. Now we're coming on to item number 2. And do we have Sue Adams from the Parish Council? Coming on to item number 2. And do we have... I see Susan Adams is on the screen on audio.
Yes, sir.
If you just hang fire, Susan, and I will get the officer to present the application. Philip? We have Susan Adams is on the screen.
Thank you, Chair.
Audio.
Item number 2.
Just hang fire, Susan, and I will get the officer to present the application. Philip? We have Susan Adams is on the screen. Chair. Audio.
Item number 2.
Just hang fire, Susan, and I will get the officer to present the application. Philip?
Thank you.
Susan Adams is... This is on a closed loop somewhere.
Item number 2.
Just hang fire, Susan, and I will get the officer to present the application. Philip? Susan Adams is... This is on a closed loop somewhere.
Item number 2.
Just hang fire, Susan, and I will get the officer to present the application.
Councillor Miller, it may be the visiting speaker. They need to switch off their YouTube if... Or...
Okay, that's muted. Philip?
Thank you, Chair. Item number 2, which can be found on page 24 of tonight's agenda, is for the change of use of the site from a garden centre to a secure storage facility for hire using up to 195 mobile shipping containers with a 2.4 metre high gated access, 1.8 metre high security fence and boundary screening at Cottesmore Garden Centre, Newby Road in Kingsclear. If I could draw members' attention to the update paper, a query has been raised from Councillor George with regards to the height of the proposed security fence around the site and if there is any proposed bunding. The proposed fencing, as stated in the description, is 1.8 metres and upon the landscape master plan, this is confirmed and it will be taken from the existing ground level. There are no bunds proposed as part of this application. Also, by way of clarification, the proposal section on page 26 of the officer's report refers to a 2.4 metre high security fence. This 2.4 metre is in reference to the security gate only, with the remainder of the fence being 1.8 metres. There has also been a further representation received this morning, which covers issues with regards to if the site is previously developed land or not, if the site is a garden centre, a general query about the planning history of the site, in addition to concerns about the access and landscape impacts of the proposal. In relation to the planning history, it is clear from an officer perspective that the site has been evolved over time and is considered to be a garden centre. And on this basis, the site has been assessed as being previously developed land and is considered reasonable when looking at the planning history in its totality that the application site is a garden centre and thus previously developed land. With regards to the landscape and highway matters raised within the representation, these have been addressed within the officer's report, which, as I stated earlier, can be found on page 24 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Susan, you can join us again, please, and you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Right. Kingsclear Parish Council object to this application.
Join us again, please, and you have...
Sorry, I'm getting feedback here. Thank
Yes.
you, Chairman.
Can we have Paul Tatum?
Right, can
Sorry,
I
Susan.
start again, please? Because I'm getting about 5 voices coming
Yes,
at
I
me.
know. Just stop right there, Susan. Is Paul Tatum online?
I am.
What's causing this, Paul? Do you know?
It's usually somebody has got either a YouTube stream or in the background is when I've experienced this before. Someone is watching it on YouTube and there's a slight delay, so it then causes the whole thing to regurgitate itself over and over again.
Could I ask anybody, and I mean anybody who's got a YouTube running on this that's on Zoom at the moment, to switch it off? Can I ask anybody, and I mean anybody who's got a YouTube running on this? Susan, do you have it running at all? Zoom at the moment.
Only for this.
Do you have it running on a computer?
Yes, on my laptop.
Please, how are you talking to us?
Only for this. On my laptop.
Well, I have to ask Paul Tatum to find out what's going on here.
So, Susan, if you have YouTube, can you close YouTube down? You should be able to still attend and hear the meeting through the Zoom application, not via YouTube.
Find out what's going on here.
So, Susan, if you have YouTube, can you close YouTube down? You should be able to still attend and hear the meeting through the Zoom application.
Right, hold on. YouTube. Yeah.
Fine.
Right,
Can you hear me? Can you hear us, Susan?
Yes.
Fine.
That's better.
Bernie, I'm going to ask you that we've got a lesson learned here, that when we send out invitations for anybody to call into this, to annotate on that invitation that they should not run Zoom in a separate window program or platform while they're interacting with the committee.
I believe it is on the guide, but we'll make it known in the email we send as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, back to business. Susan, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Kingsley Parish Council object to this application on several counts, but I'm going to concentrate on 3. Firstly, landscape. I refer the panel to the appeal decision of June 2018 on a proposal for 2 dwellings at next door Crookford Cottage, and I quote, "I conclude on this issue that the proposal will be harmful to the character and appearance of this area of countryside, and the scale of development would not accord with the criteria set out in policy SS6, as it would not be appropriate to the context of the site, nor in terms of the impact on the countryside landscape," unquote. Crookford Cottage is 25 metres from the proposed site. The footprint of the proposed storage facility is far greater than that of the proposed footprint, which would have replaced Crookford Cottage. Why, less than 2 years later, has not the same criteria on the impact on the countryside been applied to this application? The landscape team's initial response was to object, as they considered the application unacceptable due to adverse impacts on local landscape character and visual amenity. And in their revised response, they admit that they are still have some concerns about the impact on surrounding character. Even with fencing and screening, the site will be visible from the public footpath network and the A339 between the Star Public House and Happy Acres. The Parish Council argue that placing a container park within the parish boundary contravenes policy K6 of the Neighbourhood Plan, where it states that planning applications will be permitted where they respect the local character and historic and natural assets of the surrounding area and reinforces local distinctiveness and a strong sense of place. Placing a container park within rural Kingsclear in no way reinforces local distinctiveness and sense of place. Previous applications for this and adjacent sites have been refused on grounds of the adverse impact on landscape and visual impact, and as far as we can see, nothing has changed to warrant a change of opinion. On rural employment, the planning statement prepared for Greenham Trust states that the reuse of an established business site will support and contribute to the local economy. However, they then go on to state that no staff will be directly employed at the site, only several people in the region. We fail to see how an unmanned site will support our local economy. The planning officer fails to comment on policy K11 of the neighbourhood plan, reuse or conversion of agricultural and other rural buildings for business purposes, which is designed to prevent adverse impacts on landscape, roads and residents. Finally, I must comment on the access to this site. There are several submissions giving reasons why the current access is unacceptable, which we fully support. The Parish Council are particularly concerned about access from the A339. This is a straight part of the road with a speed limit of 50 miles an hour, which is often exceeded. If coming from the direction of Kingsclere and Basingstoke, we fail to see how an HGV carrying a container or crane could easily turn left into a 10-foot wide track, which is also a public right of way, without swinging across the A39 and not hitting the boundary of Happy Acres.
You had just under a minute.
Right. Likewise, the same is true of an HGV turning onto the A339. And the photographs that were previously submitted are actually false because it does not show the boundary of Happy Acres. In conclusion, the Parish Council have no objection to a sympathetic redevelopment of this site. Indeed, we would welcome it, but the redevelopment must be in keeping with the surrounding area and provide real employment opportunities for local people whilst contributing to the local economy. A container park fails to deliver on all counts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan, and right on time. Members, questions to the Parish Council. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Susan. On page 34 of the report that we have in front of us, it talks about the number of movements in and out of the site as being 6 two-way movements overall by car in a week. This set against the possible use of the site as a contractor's yard. Do you still take the attitude that the site would be detrimental to the Kingsclere to Kingsclere overall?
Well, when the site was used as a garden centre, of course, there was traffic going up and down that track, and I used it myself. So it's not car traffic which is so much of the problem. It's the fact that we are talking here about HGVs, which are going to have the containers on, and indeed a crane to actually put the containers into place. That track, which is a private road, it's not very well maintained, but you know, and then the entrance on the 339 is very narrow. The neighbouring property, Happy Acres, has actually put a boundary which wasn't shown in the photographs that you had there. So they have a boundary actually showing the entrance, which is 10 feet wide. And I just fail to see how you can get such large vehicles down that track without actually swinging out onto the 339, which would be incredibly dangerous. I mean, the access issue is something which is outside of planning and something that we think that the applicants should have really sorted out with the owners of the track beforehand.
Could I have a supplementary?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Councillor Bound.
So your objection really surrounds the putting of the containers on the site, not necessarily the operation of the site.
Well, yes, because of the, you know, it's even though with the fencing and the proposed screening, it's still going to be a relatively large site, which isn't actually replacing buildings, because the nursery buildings are still going to be there. It's actually the land at the back of what was the garden centre. There might be a few small sheds and things coming down, but it's the scale of it, and it will be visible with the fencing and the screening from the A39, which the existing garden centre still is, and from the other side of the road from the footpath network.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, any more questions for the Parish Council? No, thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you.
Is Mrs. Williams with us? No, I don't think.
Hello.
Mrs. Williams, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. Mrs. Williams, you have 4 minutes to address the committee.
Okay, thank you.
And what is your position as far as the application is concerned?
I own Crookfir Cottage.
And you are here to speak as a?
I'm here to speak for my neighbours, Mr. Plum, and also golly, sorry.
It's okay. And I understand you're an objector.
Yes, we are.
Yep. Thank you very much. Go ahead. You've got 4 minutes.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to my neighbours and my concerns over the redevelopment of this site. Firstly, I would like to question the validity of this application. The entrance to this site is owned by Mr. Plum and no notice has been served on him whatsoever. Number two, the status of Cottesmore nurseries itself. I cannot see that planning was ever given for a garden centre, only a plant nursery with ancillary sales. Does this question the application itself? The access road also is a massive concern to all of us. It's not a dual carriageway as they've stated in the planning application. It's just a single track that they have to maintain. Greenham Common are meant to maintain that road. It's just a dirt track. It only has 2 passing places and it is only 10 foot wide. And they were meant to have planted trees down either side of that as well, which they haven't done, that should have been part of the planning conditions. Then I'd like to go on to the reasons for your approval. You said that it bring employment. If there is any employment, I've looked through their prospectus and it might be one person part-time. Is that really giving any job opportunities for the local area? Number two, even though this would have an impact on the landscape and character of the site, you only deem this okay because of the economic and benefits on the employment. So this offers no economic benefit to the area as it already situated, as the containers are already at Greenham Common. And we know that the only reason they wish to relocate them to this site is to get them off of their beautiful, lovely, new looking 750-acre site to get rid of the ugly little containers and dump them down the bottom of our garden. This only leads me on to the containers. They're industrial, and just putting up security fences wrapped with green mesh isn't gonna make the landscape look any better. They have a massive impact on all of our homes, the well-being, not to mention the undesirable attention that storage container gets. So it doesn't have any safe and suitable access like you say it does. How on earth would you deem the 10-foot access road safe to manoeuvre 200 shipping containers? I'm sure you're all aware how dangerous that road is. It says 50 miles an hour, but you go on there and there's nobody going at 50 miles an hour. Not only is this, and then you put on there, no resulting or any detrimental harm. Are you kidding me? Would any of you like a 2.5 metre security fence with floodlights in your garden as your fence? I don't think so. And it says there you've got to conserve the biodiversity of it. They're already clearing that site, so they're already in breach of that. And finally, they say that they're going to use the greenhouse to screen the containers. I don't know if you put a greenhouse with glass. So the glass isn't going to stop anybody from seeing these containers, is it? It's glass. You can see everything. I would ask that you all let your conscience decide on this matter, because it is our lives of all of our neighbours. They're pensioners. They do not need this intrusion at their stage of life. And quite frankly, you can hear in my voice how upsetting it is. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Williams. Members, any questions for Mrs. Williams? No? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to call in support of the application, Mr. Isles.
Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Greenham Trust owners of the site propose a change of use of this redundant garden centre cafe involving storage of portable shipping containers. which are rented to private customers, whether local businesses or private individuals, for long-term secure storage. I'd like to elaborate on 5 key points, if I may, from your officer's report, which recommends approval. Firstly, this will be a very low intensity use for the site. Typically around only 10 to 20 customers would be visiting each week, and then there would be occasional reorganisation of the containers by the company managing. Staff would visit the site each day to check that it's secure and safe. The setting up period will take around 2 weeks, but beyond that, the intensity of the use of the site will be very low. Secondly, there is no objection from the local highway authority in this case. The proposed use would generate less traffic than the lawful existing use in the garden centre, and indeed for the extant permission from 2018 for the landscape contractors yard, which anticipated around 60 movements per working day. There has been some local dispute over the access track, but this track has served the site for many years, and Greenham Trust has access rights over it. Any matters of dispute are being resolved outside of the planning system, which is the norm. Securing a new tenant for the vacant site has long been a priority for the Trust, and will help to pay for maintenance of the track and provide security and stability for the neighbouring tenants, including Growing Together, the adult learning charity. 3, managing impact on the local landscape has been a priority throughout the application. The application was informed by a detailed landscape assessment up front, proposing new significant boundary planting. The scheme has been amended to reduce the number of containers allowed, and no longer will there be double stacking. There will be no external lighting beyond sensor activated security lights, and this will be controlled by planning condition. The landscape team has therefore removed its holding objection. Fourth, the planning conditions agreed with your officers will manage the impact on the neighbours. For example, there will be strict opening hour restrictions and no reorganisation of the site during weekends. Fifthly, there are no other outstanding technical objections in this case. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say that the proposal will secure a long-term future for a local storage business, safeguarding several local jobs and supporting businesses in and around the community who rely on storage such as this, as well as supporting the adult learning charity. The impacts will be managed appropriately and are in any case less than the existing lawful use of the garden centre or indeed the extant permission for the contractor's yard approved last year. This is an opportunity to reuse a redundant site, keep it secure, help its general upkeep, and help it continue helping the local economy in the future. We do hope that the Planning Committee can also support our proposal.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicant? Councillor Court, Councillor George, Councillor Tomlin. Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the landowner's already touched on my question. I had been there a good 5 years ago and visited the Growing Together MenCap scheme, and I wanted to ensure, was that still in place, which you've just touched on is, and are you guaranteeing the future of that site for that organisation?
Sorry, is that a question to me, the speaker?
Yes, it is. These are questions to you, Mr. Isles.
Thank you, Chair. There's never any guarantees, but what I can say is that having a neighbour here providing business rates, etc., and helping with the maintenance of the track is obviously a key part to securing the future of all of the tenants on this site.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Court?
Thank you. Do I take that their future there is secure then from your point of view as the landowner?
I think I can say on behalf of the Trust, yes, because having a neighbour rather than a vacant site can only help secure the future of all tenants on that property.
Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Isles, can I just be very clear on this? You mentioned a 2-week initial period where presumably the containers will go on site. Can I be very clear that once they're in position, there will be no, shall we say, additional movement of containers in and out? In other words, people will come in and use those containers, put stuff in and remove it from the containers, but there will not be additional container movement once the site is established.
Thank you. To clarify, there would be some additional movement, but on a very rare occasion, for example, if somebody needed to relocate their storage or if there was a repair and maintenance. But otherwise, the containers, they are portable, but they're there for the long term. That's the whole sort of premise of the storage business.
No more questions there. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Councillor George has asked my question. Thank you.
Members, are there any more questions to the applicant? None. Thank you very much, Mr. Arles. Councillor Rattigan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you very
Councillor
much.
Rattigan, good afternoon, and you speak as the ward councillor, and you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, committee. I'd like to move to the reasons for approval. Number 1, it says bring back employment use. As has already been stated by the applicant's agent, these are already in use in West Berkshire, and as this site is going to be unmanned, there is no additional employment use, and frankly, to put it in is to be disingenuous. Moving to the second one, delivering employment and economic benefit. Obviously we will get business rates on this, but it does not provide an economic benefit. And once again, employment is shown that it's beneficial. It's safe and secure. Number 3, access. Well, that is questionable on a road that is getting busier and will continue to get busier as the Mannydown project sits very neatly at the top end of the A339. It is a fast road, and when we looked at the Cuckford Cottage applications for 2 homes, it was deemed to be an unsustainable location and would have a landscape issue there. It was refused because nobody could get there apparently, even though there is a bus service between Basingstoke and Newbury on that site. It will have a direct, on number 4, direct detrimental effect on the AONB, which is at the far end of Kingsclere, and you can visualize this site from White Hill. There is no problem with that on a clear day. It is unfortunate that this is a blot on the landscape. Now, biodiversity will be affected. They've already cleared the site. So, the idea that they're maintaining the site for the benefit of birds and wildlife is frankly appalling. This shouldn't be a dumping ground of containers, which would go from the council offices right down London Road to the far end of where the RBS Bank was, if stretched end to end. This is a huge development and a huge intrusion into the rural nature of this site. It has a direct effect on lots of people who use the walkways and pathways around there. And they will be able to see it, not just as you come out of the village, but from places such as the Star Pub that many of you may have used. This I feel, is an industrial intrusion into a rural location and does not meet many of the quantums of why you would accept this to be acceptable to us. Kingsclere Neighbourhood Plan has already been outlined by Sue Adams of the parish, was very robust in its policies, and K6 holds true to that. And if we are going to give substance to people to take the time and effort to make neighbourhood plans, we should support them in the fullest extent through our council deliberations and your decisions at DC. I move that you reject this and look for a better scheme to come forward with the employment opportunities at a future date.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Members, questions for the ward councillor? Councillor Bound.
Good afternoon, Councillor. I was just wondering, how far away would you say the industrial estate is that where Wiltshire Farm Foods is, for instance?
It's about 400 yards away, probably a quarter of a mile. That is small vehicles that Wiltshire Foods use. The access to that is, the displays are much better. You can get in and out of it with much ease, and there will not be the transportation of large containers into that site. So it's very different, Councillor Brown.
Thanks.
Any more questions for the ward member? Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you.
Questions to officers? Councillor McCormack, followed by Councillor George, followed by Councillor Court.
Just to clarify, this is a lock and store type storage facility, similar to what you sometimes see on the TV programs where they open up the garages and show you a load of stuff inside.
That's correct, Councillor, yes.
Councillor George, and I have Councillor Robinson as well.
Thank you very much, Chair. Looking at the landscaping issues, I noticed the proposal relies on nursery buildings and greenhouses in some cases, to existing greenhouses, to actually screen some of these containers and things like that. I do notice in condition 4 that there's a landscape area or report to be produced, but it seems to focus on sort of very much on plants and trees and things like that. Can I ask, is there anything in there to require them to maintain the greenhouse and the buildings, or substitute additional screening methods if necessary?
It would largely be dependent on what's submitted as part of the condition 4 in terms of their landscape management plan. If the screening was proposed to be retained as part of that management plan, then that would sort of form part of that that condition, that requirement there. I think the buildings fall outside the application site in the red edge on this one, so there wouldn't be necessarily anything to stop them from being removed at a later date necessarily, but it would depend on what comes in as part of that condition 4, which would be something that would be looked at by the landscape officer at the time of that submission.
Right, no more, Councillor George. Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask the officers, what sort of evidence do we have on the traffic movements for facilities like this? I know we don't have an awful lot around them, but I tried to look online and get some ideas. There's nothing I could find, but the sort of people that tend to use them, removal vans where people are immigrating maybe for a set period. So you'll get removal vans coming in and out. Companies tend to use them as storage space to keep their stock and then go on a daily basis to collect their stock. And so the number of traffic generated here in the report seems rather low when you consider all these different uses.
Thank you, Councillor. So the information submitted as part of the application support in terms of the vehicle movements to and from the site was something that was reviewed by Hampshire County Council Highways. The Highways officer, following a site visit and sort of review of the information that had been submitted, has not raised an objection to the proposal in terms of the access as well as the vehicle movements to and from the site. So yes, there may well be the case that there could be some more movements than prescribed in terms of the information submitted, but in any case the highway officer didn't raise an objection to the scheme in general. Moving on, if the garden centre use were to be brought back in, there wasn't a restriction in terms of the original application back in 1992 for the movement of vehicles to and from the site, or the use of heavy goods vehicles to and from the site, as well as the most recent application back in 2018 for the use of the site as a contractor's yard, which could be implemented at the site. Again, there weren't any concerns raised by the highway officer at that point as well. So I'm not sure if that covers off the question, but happy to, if you've got anything further to come back, then I can obviously try and address that as well.
Right, nothing else, Councillor Court? Right, Councillor Robinson, who will be followed by Councillor Bound and Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, if I may. Firstly, we're being told that these containers are going to be basically put on site and stay there. If at some time in the future we found that the owner was moving the containers in and out of the site on a regular basis, and his usage had changed slightly from what he clearly intends at the moment, what could we do about that? Is it, would this planning permission fail on the fact that he's now changed his usage slightly and he's moving containers in and out on a regular basis, or would we have no control whatsoever over that?
Thank you, Councillor. So, yeah, in terms of the wording of the conditions, the site is to be used for this higher storage facility. So there's nothing, as far as I can tell, as part of the conditions that would restrict vehicle movements. I think it would be difficult to establish what potentially could happen in the future, or what might not happen. I think the thing we've got here is a condition which restricts the number of storage containers on the site, but I don't think there's anything specifically restricting vehicle movements in and out, as I think that would be quite hard to potentially establish at this time on what could happen in the future if we were to change the use. I mean, I'm not sure if my my colleagues would be able to add anything further in that regard. But yeah, from my understanding, there isn't specifically something that would restrict it in the wording of the conditions. Right, Lisa, you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just to clarify, as Philip has advised, there is a condition restricting the number of containers that can be present on the site. So that in itself would limit the number of movements potentially. There's also the condition restricting the use to be self-storage, but there isn't any way of controlling. You couldn't say put a figure on a number of vehicles per day, for example, because that would just be unenforceable. You wouldn't be able to keep a track on that. So I think in terms of the number of containers on site and the use of the site itself for that secure storage is as far as you could go in terms of limiting, the numbers to and from there.
I'd just like to sort of interpose at this particular point, because I believe the applicant stated 10 to 20 per week. Was I accurate in that, making that note? Because the issue comes up about the amount of traffic could be material, I think, I could be corrected, in the determination of the application. If we consider 10 to 20 a week isn't too bad, and then I go back to Councillor Robinson's question, if it gets in excess of that, because I think this is traffic that's going past the current residential properties that are on that road. I think most of the committee probably remember that application that when it went through, because I can remember conducting the viewing panel on it. I think that was behind the question of Councillor Robinson to the officers. We're being given an indication by the applicant. That seems to be the only indication of how much traffic will be involved in this site. Could I ask Philip to comment on that?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can comment on that front is that the highways officer has reviewed the information that was submitted by the applicant, and also has also done his own review of the application, and he's not queried any of the vehicle movements approximations or the supporting information which outlined what would happen on the site, and the officer hasn't raised an objection to it. So from Hampshire's point of view, they were happy with the proposal. They didn't raise any concerns with regards to the proposed approximate numbers, and they didn't raise any queries back to the applicant in terms of increased traffic to and from the site. So that's the response on that side of things. I don't know if there's something further you'd like clarification on, but I think, yes, the highway officer is content with the application.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Yeah, just you're correct, Councillor Miller. I heard from the applicant's agent 10 to 20 movements a week. Also on page 34 of the agenda, I think the approximate vehicular two-way trips has been set out and looking at the supporting information within the transport assessment that came in with the application, this shows less than the garden centre use that is based on a sort of industry standard for garden centres, showing reduction in this use from that one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. Philip, and the objector mentioned the lighting, which would be intrusive in the scene there. On page 39 of our papers, there is a condition 11. It says any exterior lighting should be erected and maintained in accordance with the approved details and shall only be used in accordance with the opening hours identified. Do I take it that only when the site is open for public use that the lights will be on?
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, condition 11 requires that an external lighting scheme is provided, and then the lighting shall be operational between those hours for the opening times, as set out in condition 10. So yes, basically the external lighting as part of a plan to be submitted is to be set out in accordance with condition 10 and the hours of the site operation.
So for clarification, the lighting will not be on then outside of the hours of operation.
That's the wording of the condition, yes.
Councillor Potter.
Sorry, Chair. My questions have been asked by others, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I've got one question for the officers. Going back to the lighting, because the site is within the AONB, there has been a lot of concern within the AONB of the contravention of planning conditions, not only within this borough, but other boroughs within the AONB, of lighting that is going against the accepted policy of dark skies. And I make that comment to go on the record because if, as you confirmed with Councillor Bound, outside the working hours of this site, the lighting will be switched off. I'm assuming that if they have any security lighting, that will be at a much lower level. Do we have that assurance?
So in terms of the lighting, it'll be yet to be established as part of the scheme that's to be submitted in. I think the site itself falls outside of the AONB. I think it's within a character area in Kingsclear. But in any case, the lighting, security lighting, is to be shown to us and approved before the operations on the site itself. So we can have a look at that time when the conditions are discharged. But yes, of course, if it were to be approved, the plan, and they were used outside of those hours, that would be something that would be subject to the enforcement of it, and we can look at it at that point if that were to be the case.
Fine, thank you very much. No more questions to officers. We move to debate. Who'd like to kick off? Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Chair, that was a question to the officers I was trying to get in.
Councillor Tomlin, go ahead to question to officers.
Okay, so a very brief one. Hours of operation, we have a condition of hours. Can you clarify, please, that did we set those? Are they a national standard? What flexibility do we have? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the hours of operation were in part looked at from what the previous site of the contractor's yard was used for. They were also considered in conjunction with the environmental health team and officers in terms of what could be acceptable from the likely movements and disruptions perhaps from the site. So if there were concerns with regards to the length of operation, that the conditions could be something that's looked at by members. But these were formed following discussions with the applicant, officers, and environmental health officers as well.
Okay. Right, we go back to debate and Councillor Robinson. Or is this a question to officers?
No, it's debate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We go to debate.
I'm very concerned regarding the question that I asked the officers about vehicle movements, that it seems to me that if at some point in the operation of this site, the operation changed to moving of the containers on a regular basis, we have no control over that. We could find ourselves in a year or two's time that we've effectively given planning permission for 20 container movements a day on this site, and absolutely no way that we will be able to stop that, never mind any other traffic. So I've got a huge amount of concern over that. Also, I think the loss of amenity to the neighbours. If I lived in a cottage in the countryside next to a garden centre, that's one thing. To live next door to an industrial container park is just going to ruin their lives. It's going to ruin the area they live. This belongs on an industrial estate, and we're not short of industrial space in this area. There is absolutely no need for this to go on a site in the countryside. So for those reasons, loss of amenity to the neighbours and road safety with possible movements, I recommend this is refused. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson, is that a motion to, or proposal of a motion to refuse the application?
It is, you're quite right.
Thank you. I will ask, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor George. I will continue with the debate. It's been proposed and seconded. And the reasons given were on transport, access, and landscape, I believe. Amenity, restriction of amenity. Thank you. Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe we should add the fact that we don't think there's any real demonstrable additional employment or economic benefit of this, and certainly in terms of, you know, if it's an unmanned site, do we actually achieve any local employment? I'd probably add that to this.
Understood. Councillor Robertson.
I'm happy to include those. Yes, thank you.
Right. Any more debate? It's been properly moved and seconded. And officers, do you want to include? Oh, there's no real conditions to be put onto this. The motion's been moved and seconded for refusal. I will take a poll on that motion and whether councillors are for or against the motion for refusal. Councillor George.
Refusal.
Yeah, you're voting for a refusal.
Correct, yes.
You're for the motion.
For the motion, yes.
Councillor Leeks.
For the motion.
For the motion. Councillor Robinson. For the motion.
For the motion.
Councillor Goddison.
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Court.
For the motion.
For the motion. Councillor Grant.
For the motion.
For the motion. Councillor McCormick.
Against the motion.
Against the motion. Councillor Bound.
I think Anne Greaves wanted to speak. For.
I'm sorry, Anne, do you want to speak?
Chair, yes. If you could just give the planning officer a chance to comment on the reasons for refusal, in case she has any advice about whether any part of that might not be sustainable, particularly the highways.
At this stage or after the rest of the vote?
I think pause the vote, Chair.
I have paused the vote at Councillor Bound. I'll come back to you, Councillor Bound. Lisa.
I just wanted to be clear in terms of the particular reason around the highways. My hearing of Councillor Robinson was just on the number of vehicular movements, and we've had that information set out before you, and we have no highway objection. So I'm not sure whether members were concerned about the nature and type of vehicles that could be used, rather than just the general numbers, of which there is no highway objection. I just wondered if members wanted to clarify that for us. And then the other reasons: loss of amenity to neighbours, neighbouring amenity, and no demonstrable economic benefit, and therefore contrary to the MPPF and policy EP4 of the plan.
EP4, yeah. Councillor Robinson, on highways?
I'm particularly concerned about the potential for heavy lorry movements over which we will have no control once this has got planning permission.
Lisa, have you got a comment?
Sorry, Councillor Robinson, would you mind repeating that, because there was a brief dropout on my screen, sorry.
I'm particularly concerned about the potential for heavy lorry movements over which we will have no control once this has got planning permission.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. So it's more about the nature and type of vehicles that would be associated with this use. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely right, thank you.
Right, no more questions, because we've got the other two reasons as well. Right, go back to Councillor Bound.
For the motion.
For the motion. Councillor Potter.
I'm against the motion, and I should have said more in support of the officers, but anyway, I'm against the motion.
You're against the motion. Councillor Tomlin.
For the motion.
For the motion. That's the voting poll complete. Bernie.
I have 8 for the recommendation and 2 against.
Thank you. The motion for refusal is approved. Officers, comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the application is refused, in particular regarding the nature and type of vehicles that will be generated by this use, contrary to policy CN9 of the local plan. No demonstrable economic benefit would be associated, therefore contrary to the framework and policy EP4, and the impact on amenity, and from the debate I include neighbouring amenity and landscape and visual impact in that.
Thank you very much. That item is concluded. We move on to item 3, and there are no speakers on this item. And Lisa, if I could ask you to introduce it, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application 97 Derwent Road in Basingstoke for the erection of a single-storey front extension and the replacement of an existing rear flat roof with a pitched roof and a pitched roof over the side. Within the visualiser presentation that's before you today, we've also put in plans of the existing property just so that you can see what the property is like before and after, as the existing plans weren't included within the main pack. The application is before members for consideration, since the applicant is a member of staff within the planning development team. There is no update to add, and the application is recommended for approval as per the main agenda.
Fine, and your point about the visualizer, if we can cycle through the existing elevations and then the proposed elevations so that the members can get a better idea of it. And if we could go back
if I could help you there, obviously the shaded elements that you see, this the ones with the lines on, so that's the rear elevation with the roof lights, just showing that it's now pitched. If we go through each elevation, so again, looking at that left hand side, you can see the small extension there to the front, and that's got horizontal lines on it to differentiate from the existing dwelling, and again on the right hand side, the pitched roof that's replacing the flat roof. on the front there. That just shows you the front projection of that, which is very similar to what's there already. It's just bringing it out a little bit forward to create some extra space.
Thank you very much. Questions to officers, please. And I need the full screen back. Thank you. Questions to officers? Councillor McCormack.
So just to confirm, we're looking at a front extension and conversion of a flat roof to a shallow pitched roof out the back. And that's all we're considering with this application.
Yes, and a pitched roof over the entrance door on the side elevation. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's if it was the intention for the extension to be included, then I might have a problem with it. But it's basically adding on to stuff that's already there out the back, and the if it was front and back something that size, I'd have a couple of questions on the kind of size of it relative to the original property. But if it's a simple front extension with pitched roof and then fixing the flat roof at the back, I don't have a problem with it.
Right, any more questions to officers? As it's presented to the committee, I tend to move this from the chair on the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Court, or do you want to speak?
I was just going to say a few words as the ward member. It's not setting a precedent. I think most people on this estate have already done that already. So I'm quite happy. I was going to move it, but I'm quite happy to second it.
Been properly moved and seconded for the officer's recommendation. I'll work my way through the poll. Councillor George.
Approver's recommendation.
For the recommendation, thank you. Councillor Leeks.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Robinson.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Goodison.
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Court.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Grant.
For the recommendation.
Councillor McCormack.
For.
Councillor Bound.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
For the recommendation.
Thank you very much. That is the conclusion of the agenda. Our next meeting is on the 10th of June. That currently on the target list, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. And Lisa, I see you waving, don't worry. We've got 7.
Sorry, we haven't. You do need Democratic Services to confirm the number of votes and for me to confirm the outcome of the application council.
You're right. Maybe I'm too keen to close. No, you're absolutely right, and thank you for that. Bernie.
I have 10 for the recommendation.
Thank you. That's carried. Officers.
Yes, just confirm the application has been approved, subject to conditions set out in the main agenda.
Thank you very much. And you're quite correct in pulling me up on that one. Right. I was just saying, we've got 7 on the target list for the 10th of June. We'll see a bit closer to the time how many appear in the report. But thank you very much for your time. 1 or 2 little glitches. We've learned a couple of more lessons in this one. And I'll be consulting with officers subsequent to this Virtual Development Control Committee. And we're going to be doing a bit more planning ahead on some of the larger applications that are in the pipeline, of which most of you are aware of, and see how we can schedule those in. Thank you very much again. Thank you, officers, for coming along and doing this, and enjoy your upcoming weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.